Welcome to the Election University podcast, a weekly show where we hear from industry experts who share tips and tricks for winning campaigns. Whether you're running for office now, thinking about it for the future, or just want to know more about campaigns and elections, Election University is for you. With Election University, click, learn, win. And now, your host, Jason Bennett.
Hello, Election University podcast listeners. Thank you for tuning in on another episode of the Election University podcast. I am flying solo today. You may have caught that in the intro. And the reason is we are in Las Vegas for the DEF CON conference. It's the world's largest and oldest hacker conference, cybersecurity hacker conference. And we're coming at you live because last year when they did this conference, they stirred up a little controversy. They basically did this voting village of electronic voting machines, the machines that we use in several polling locations across the U.S., and they invited hackers to come in and hack into the voting machines to find out where the vulnerabilities, where the exploits could be in these machines. And they were able to do it within 30 minutes. So this year they're doing a part 2, and we wanted to be a part of it, where they're inviting kids under 17 years of age to hack into Secretary of State's websites to see if they can manipulate the totals, change data. They also have another voting village here to see what sort of mayhem that they can cause with these machines. And we wanted to be here. We wanted to talk to the experts, find out a bit more about the vulnerabilities in our system and what's being done to prevent a 2016 invasion, manipulation, however you want to frame it, by Russia or other bad actors again. So we're here on the ground and we are conducting a series of interviews. Our first one is with a state representative. We had done a series called Young Candidates Taking Over. And we first talked with Representative Yu-Lin Niu from New York. And now we're going to do a part 2. We're going from New York to Montana. We're going to District 45 in Montana. We're going to talk today with State Representative Daniel Zolnikov. And he ran for office at 25 years of age. He's now 31. He's been elected a few times. But when he first ran, he was 25 years of age, was sworn into office at 26, and is now chair at 31 years of age of the Energy and Technology Committee. And he's here at the DEF CON conference talking about privacy and freedom of the press and ways that we can ensure the surveillance state doesn't impact us or expand further than it is. And he's going to talk about the great legislation that he's done to help curtail some of our privacy trade-offs as we become more technologically advanced as a society. So I'm excited to talk with him today. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about Daniel's bio, and then I'm going to turn it right over to him to talk about why he got interested and what his campaign was like. So Daniel Zolnikov, state representative from District 45 in Montana. He has been noted by Forbes magazine as one of the top 30 under 30 elected officials, and he's noted as the top 30 conservatives under the age of 30 by Red Alert Politics. So not only do we talk to Democrats in New York, but we're also talking to conservatives in Montana about what it's like running for office when you're a young candidate, what obstacles you face, and what it's like when you are head of a committee at 31 years of age. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn this over to Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I'd love to know a bit more about your bio, what we didn't cover here, and what got you excited about politics. How'd you get involved?
Yeah, definitely. I was that guy who, I wasn't really into sports too much and was very social in high school. And I just remember in a class realizing, well, Montana has a smaller population, right? So the representatives have a little bit of a smaller amount of people. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, in government class, I could actually, if half the people vote and I got half the people who voted to vote for me, I could win an election. I could, I was always the guy who wanted to change things or thought I could make things better. So it was in the back of my mind, and then I moved out of Montana, came back to Montana, and the seat opened up. That was a pretty moderate seat, and that had been in my mind for years. And so I just cut costs to basically nothing, and I campaigned from signed up in January. I was actually 24 when I signed up. And then a week later, I turned 25, and basically all through 25 years old, I was campaigning and knocking doors, raising money, doing phone calls to the constituents. Just insane.
So you graduate from college at 22, 23 years of age.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, you're running for office.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know more about that thought process. You studied political science when you were in college.
I got 3 business majors and a political science minor. including information systems.
So it's always been an interest of yours, but how did you take that leap? So I graduated from college and I became an intern in one of the Senate offices, which is probably what like normal pathways to elected office would be, is like start small, but you just jumped right in and decided to run for office. I think young people in particular have a challenge of thinking that they're ready to do it. So how'd you get there?
Like I said, one thing, I'm kind of a minimalist, so I don't have a lot of stuff, and I don't have a lot of debt, and I don't have much expenses, and I still live that type of lifestyle. So I am able to, and was able to cut my costs to nothing and basically knock on doors. So a lot of people have a plan. I'm big on this, but they don't have a strategy. And if you want to do something, you got to convince yourself, okay, I got to make these phone calls. I got to figure out the rules. I got to basically like raise money somehow and have a strategy for every single thing. So it was that. And then I also had some friends who had been involved in politics. And so instead of having like groupthink of people who don't know, we always ask them for suggestions. I had a few people who I'd ask, and what they told me, I would just do exactly what they pointed to because they had the background expertise. So it was nice. That is
really nice.
It's like free political consulting, but they were friends who wanted me to win.
Yeah. So let's talk about the party then. So you're a Republican and you ran on a Republican ticket. What did the party think of this young upstart coming in and running for office? Did they have somebody else in mind for the seat, or was it just a free-for-all and they were letting it play out as it were in the primary?
You know, weirdly enough, 6 months prior, I met some state senators and I think state reps and some people who worked for the U.S. congressman. We only have one in Montana. Right. And they got to know me, and they were like, oh, actually, do we think he'd be a good candidate? And so all they wanted me, I had like a frohawk, so like all they wanted, they suggested strongly was to change my hair a little bit. But yeah, they knew me, so all of a sudden, without like just very lucky interaction, I was one of the people that they were all for, and they didn't actually know much about me. So like in Montana's legislature, I'm known as the Libertarian Republican,
right?
But a functional Libertarian Republican where I don't tell everybody off. I like try to work and find common ground and form coalitions.
Yeah.
Not just I hate everything and everybody and be destructive. So I try to be a positive, add positivity to the liberty side of things.
Yeah. I want to talk about that in particular and the bipartisan work that you did. But one of the things that I'm curious about, you know, a young person running for office at 25 years of age, one of the huge impediments for young people running is like their network and not having enough, right? So most of the people that are drawn to this are retired or well-to-do or in professions where their donors can make large, sizable contributions, attorneys, doctors, whatever. So how did you build your network and how did you raise the funds to compete?
Well, that's great because I'm from a town north of Billings, where I represent out of Billings, called Roundup, Montana, and it's a very low-income town, and my family included. And then all my friends, most of them were like just out of college, starting to make money, so like nobody had a lot of money. But Montana has super low contribution limits, so I was able to raise like $100 or 100, like our max contribution limits are $160. In comparison, Texas is unlimited, so you can get like a $50,000 check from one person. So I had to raise $160 at a time, but since my network was so limited and small, it actually benefited me because the other guy who could raise more money was also stuck with those same limits. So weirdly enough, it benefited me and hurt my opponent more so. But I mean, I Facebook messaged people, I called people, and I asked, and then I basically started asking people who my political friends were like, hey, these guys are Republican donors. So then they would point to me in those directions. Yeah. But I had no network. Like, it was small. Yeah.
You built it from scratch. It was like a true startup business.
Yeah.
From start. And then talk about the race. Did it get contentious? Was it brutal? How much money was raised?
I mean, that was small. I remember we have a smaller amount of people, so 100. Well, I think at that point it was $160 max contribution limit. I don't know, like 16 or 17,000, and then the next, so raise that. I just knocked doors. I knocked my district 1.5 times. And I actually knocked the doors and talked to people. People say like dropping literature is knocking doors. No, I literally knocked the doors in my district 1.5 times.
And
that resonates with people.
For sure.
And the other thing is you don't have a 2-minute conversation, go to the next door. If someone wants to talk for 20 minutes, you talk for 20 minutes.
Right.
And you look them in the eye. Because the second you look bored or you look up or around, like they know that you're just not being authentic.
Right. And I'm assuming that this is not a dense area, that the houses are spread out.
Oh, this is a more, actually, for Montana, more urban area.
Oh, it is?
So
okay.
It was pretty close.
So it's easier to doorbell 1.5 times and have those, deeper conversations than it is if this was more rural and the houses were spread apart.
Yeah. I mean, just think like 8-hour days, and then weekdays is like 4 hours, and it's just hot, like 90 some degrees, and it's every day. That was my thing. I did, what was it? I think it was 24 days in a row before I took a break to go to a political event, where people suggested I go to, because I head down, you knock doors.
Right.
Because it's like funny, when people run for office, they want to go to the events and wear their badges and pretend they're candidates who are special. No, go talk to the voters who are going to vote for you.
Right.
There's no more important use of your time.
And is the district Republican? It
was leaning a little bit Republican, and then they redistricted it, so mine's a lot more conservative now.
I see.
So this last election, I had a primary, and that's where there was another Republican challenging me for my third election.
Let's talk about your work in the legislature. So I'd like to know the makeup of your legislature in terms of age. So you're going to be one of the younger people that's elected and sworn into office. Mm-hmm. What are you looking at generationally when you're sworn into office?
Like the numbers?
Yeah, the makeup of both caucuses and the legislature.
So we have there's probably about 5 guys in their 20s when I first got elected, which was kind of obscure. And even more recently, it's still like 4 guys in their 20s. And then I turned 30 last session in the legislature. So I still count myself in my 20s.
Yeah.
And so now I don't get to do that anymore. But, and then there's like a handful of 30s and 40s, but then you're right, 50s and 60s, they have the resources, they have the money, they have the time. Everybody else is balancing their families and jobs and their lives, and it's hard for them to run and serve. You sacrifice a lot.
Right.
I mean, people think, oh, you're politics, you make all this money and you're corrupt. And like, maybe you're putting like the DC federal thing on the state level, because we get paid very little, and it takes a lot of your time, and you're always like, there's always the thing hanging over your head that it's going to be held against you. You got to read something horrible about yourself in the paper. Like, you're helping constituents. You don't get paid for that at all.
Right.
It's like there's all this stuff that people don't see that it makes it hard to run, especially in my state.
Yeah. And so when you get down there, and you specialize in privacy technology, you're chair of your version of the Technology and Energy Committee, is that correct?
Yeah, energy and technology.
Yeah, is that what it's?
Yeah.
Energy and technology. Yeah. Clever. So I'm imagining, so when I think about this stuff, I think about when Zuckerberg came before the US Senate, and like literally nobody knew much about Facebook at all. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering if you're facing something similar on a state level, where there's just a huge disconnect because you were raised in technology and you're working with people maybe on your committee or who are opposing your legislation that just kind of don't get this, and how much of your time is spent on education and as opposed to, horse trading and getting the bill passed.
There's a lot of trust, because I believe I'm a pretty independent person. Mm-hmm. Both sides know it. So when I talk to them, there's not some political rhetoric behind what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There is like a lot of trust on, I know this is what I care about. People know I care about it. It's not like, oh, it'd be great to do this bill. It's like, I know the bill. I know the details. I know the opposition, what they're going to say. And I can like argue it to a pretty good point for having no legal background. Mm-hmm. So the passion is there, and people understand like the basics of what I'm trying to do, but they don't know all of it. So there's a lot of trust on this policy. The other side is it's just not political. No one really cares about it as much. It's not like guns or abortion or something, taxes even. So there's the main political issues, and there's my issues that don't get a lot of attention. And that's really nice, actually. Yeah. Because it's not politicized. It's not like a big partisan battle there. It's just is like, oh, constitutional, and this fits well with like ACLU and like individual rights legislation, and both sides now can agree on it. Yeah. My bills all went through the Judiciary Committee, believe it or not.
Interesting.
So if I do future bills with technology and like companies, it'd probably go through my committee.
Yeah.
But the ones that had to do with law enforcement and warrant requirements, those all went through judiciary.
Yeah. Let's talk about the ACLU and some of your bills. So they are big supporters of your legislation. You actually wrote a piece why Republicans should be more supportive of the ACLU. And you're here talking at this tech conference about, or this hacker conference about privacy. Can you talk to us about your legislation and what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about with the ACLU too?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So my legislation, we'll touch on that first. Basically, one of the first bills I ever passed, the first bill I ever passed, was a GPS warrant requirement for like your location tracking, and that was the first one in the nation. Then I did a freedom of the press bill saying the press's digital communications cannot be obtained ever, and that is now the strongest freedom of the press bill in the nation, which is cool. And then,
so if I'm a source for a journalist and we have digital communications, I send them information digitally. That can't be subpoenaed. You can't get a search warrant for it.
No exceptions.
Okay.
They cannot obtain it.
In Montana.
Yeah, in Montana.
Yeah.
I wish it was in the federal. I wish it was in the country.
Right.
And it's basically if you were a whistleblower on the press and somebody wanted to know who was whistleblowing, they couldn't force me to tell them, the press, but they could go through the press's digital communications because with the third party doctrine, that's not really their private information. Yeah. And yeah, so the source could be found out. The whole point was to strengthen the role of the press and allow whistleblowers to feel more, I guess, empowered.
Yeah.
And it's more of obviously a model bill for Montana. Like it's in our state law, but it's like this isn't as big in Montana as it is like federally,
right.
I think.
And how does your base feel about this now? Supporting, being supportive of the press and backing them up. Does that feel at odds with where your base is in your district?
I would say my base knows I'm pretty authentic. Mm-hmm. Like my actual, like not just the base of the party, and you kind of get a whole different mixture. But yeah, you know what? Some people have problems with the press. I just wrote a great op-ed about why like the freedom of the press is so important. But in the end, it's a First Amendment constitutional right. Right. And if anybody argues against that, then they're not a like constitutional Republican, which most Republicans I'd say in Montana are.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to argue against yourself.
Right.
So just supporting the First Amendment.
Right.
They want freedom of religion and freedom of speech. You can't like take away freedom of assembly or to petition the government or press. Like you get to the whole package.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. And so you're here at DEF CON. You're going to be given a talk later. Talk to us about what you're going to be covering in your discussion.
So there's a few other bills I passed last time that I'm talking a little bit about, but that was like a warrant requirement for your electronic devices, and then warrant or Fourth Amendment subpoena, which is almost the same as the Fourth Amendment, or I think it is the same. Fourth Amendment warrant requirement for electronic communications. Then we reformed license plate readers so they couldn't basically be used to map out where Montanans have been. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing with the ACLU is there was a lot of common ground on this legislation. And there's a lot of common ground with stuff. Now, I know with Republicans, there is a lot with abortion that the ACLU is for and they're against. But I try to find common ground issues both sides of the aisle can agree to and figure out like what's the best way to get this good policy through. And I try doing technology where nobody's even talking about it.
Right.
And so they were really helpful. Like they basically helped with one side of the aisle. And then I worked on the other side of the aisle, obviously my side of the aisle. And then there was like a gun group that supported my bills. Like the Christian Family Foundation, like did a like a little like 2-minute blip on my legislation. Like they didn't show up to testify for it, but they were in support of it. Like it was just crazy coalitions of unique people who really have nothing in common supporting the one thing they have in common.
Yeah.
Which is how it should work. Right. Not I hate you guys and I hate you guys and we're always going to fight.
Yeah.
No, so the ACLU was helpful and they showed up. And like the other ones that showed up constantly was the Library Association. So the ACLU, Library Association, and then at the end, a group of hackers in Helena showed up.
Oh.
So like, yeah, my world is fun because it's not like, it is the opposite of, it's like the antithesis of politics.
Yeah.
Just everything's random.
So I want to get more of you elected, right? Obviously, I'm left of center. The podcast is geared towards nonpartisan, largely municipal races. But it would be, I think, very refreshing to have people on both sides of the aisle have more of the view that you take on this in state and local government. And how do you get more young people elected who really just, I think, are focused on the problem solving as opposed to the point scoring?
That's the thing is I see a lot of people are interested in politics for many reasons, mm-hmm. right? But if you're interested in politics for the sake of politics and you really want to be on tribalism, if you really are part of your team or the other team, you're going to really miss the policy. Mm-hmm. And so you got to get through the politics to get elected to really get to the policy where you can impact your state in a great manner. But a lot of times they get elected and they're stuck in the politics part and they don't transition to the policy. Because if you go to policy, you have to negotiate. You have to figure out coalitions or how to really change a bill from being bad. And you got to talk to everybody. And that means you got to get away from this tribalism. And that's a huge thing that people are dedicated to their party. And if their party transitions, they go with it. And it could be something they completely disagree with 8 months ago. And they are now completely with it because those are their people and they're going to stick with their people. And so I see a lot of tribalism with some younger people. So if they can be I don't really care if you're part of the party, but I would maintain that independence. Find something wrong with your own party that you'd like to fix. Because a lot of people, they think their party's perfect and they point at the other one. How does that benefit anybody? That's like saying, I'm perfect and you need to change yourself and become better. Everybody needs to become better. Everybody's party could be better. Yeah. I think.
That's a really good point. So I know you have to get moving, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. That's a really great piece of advice. If you were going to give advice to folks who are thinking about running for office, and they're planning in the planning stages right now, what advice would you give them for the planning?
I would definitely look at, there's a lot. Every state's different. You have different, make sure the seat you're running for, first off, is winnable. If it's if you're a Democrat running in a conservative seat, it's an 80% conservative seat, you are most likely not going to win that seat. Right? First off, be reasonable. Second off, have, again, a strategy. If it's X doors and you know that it's a primary race, you make it a time. You find out how much it's going to take in time. You don't lie to yourself. Say, I can do it in 8 hours when it's going to take you 80 hours. Right. And then you figure out in your schedule what you're going to cut out. If you're going to do a part-time job, what you are going to do to sacrifice to make it through. You cancel your weekend plans. Because if there's one weekend plan that's more important than this, then you're not going to win your election. Yeah. You have to make this everything, and you have to have a strategy for it all. And it's just be honest with yourself. This is going to be a lot of time and effort, but they're winnable. So many people who need to be challenged aren't challenged. Yeah. And again, sometimes you got to primary people. If they're in your party, you think they're worthless, go against them. Yeah. I think that's the whole point of this system.
and final question on this. So in advice for people building their lists and getting going, on this, because I think that is the one deterrent for the young people running for office is just their networks they haven't had 30 years in the workforce, right, to build that network. You had hinted at this earlier that you had friends that would sort of point you in the direction of Republican donors. What does that process look like, and how do you approach the donors afterwards? Is it kind of a cold call, or how do you get that warmed up?
I like doing letters because I hate, and some things you just don't change about yourself. And some people can cold call really well. And with our low donation limits, we really don't need to as much. But I like to do donation letters. We did some fundraisers where I got to meet people. So it's really different, but I would probably expect most people would have to make phone calls. But if they had phone calls and there's so many different ways to do it. You can get introductions by someone who knows them. You could do the cold calls. But you have to be willing to do it to raise the money, because as great of a candidate somebody is, they need to get known by the electorate. And you signing up to run doesn't mean anybody even cares that you're running for the seat. You have to reach out to them, have the media, figure out how big of the voter base you need to contact is, figure out how to do 7 marketing touches with them, which is mail or radio or signs, and that costs money. So now you have to figure out how much money is it. And then you look up previous races. How much did they raise? How could you raise that money? Who do you know? Who do you know that could help somebody? Do you have another senator or representative who could help you really navigate that?
Yeah.
You see, like it's not simple.
It's not
simple.
But
it's doable. It's doable.
Yeah. It's possible.
I would say find somebody in the world you're already at and really hold on to them and like get them to walk you through what you need to do next. Like if it's find donor lists or what, you can use consultants for donor lists. I mean, there's all these different routes to go. Yeah. It's more, don't make a big excuse. Like just figure out how to do it.
Right.
Legally.
Yeah, legally. Let's emphasize that. So this is the bragging rights section of the wrap-up. So talk to us about District 45, what makes it special, and where can folks learn more about you?
My district it's awesome. Like I've just knocked those doors literally 3 campaigns now. So a year of my life has been spent on those doors. I don't know. They treat me very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really nice. I don't get much. I'm extremely independent politically, like in the legislature, and a lot of people, like they don't. If I do something a little unique, I don't get it held against me or anything. So I really like my constituents, and then if I get phone calls with constituent issues, I try to solve those like immediately.
Yeah.
Where I have a website, danielzolnikov.com, but I really use my Facebook a lot, which is facebook.com / Daniel Zolnikov. And you search my name. It's Zolnikov. I'm the Russian American in Montana working on anti-surveillance legislation. Speaking at a hacker convention.
It rolls off the tongue. We will have all that in the show notes. For sure. Representative, thank you so much for taking time today. Good luck with your talk later on, and we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise with folks.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Another big thank you to State Representative Daniel Zolnikov for joining us. Thank you so much, Daniel. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, and particularly while you're getting ready for your big speech tomorrow, to share your knowledge about young people running for office. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on another episode. We truly appreciate your subscriptions and your comments and your reviews. We really take them personally, and we really do react to them. So if you have a suggestion or any advice or tips that you have for us, feel free to email us at podcast@electionu.com. On behalf of Rainey Cohen, this is Jason Bennett signing off until next week. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you for listening. This week's episode has ended, but the campaign fun doesn't have to. Head on over to www.electionu.com, where you can access all of the links mentioned in today's episode, as well as the show notes. There you can also sign up for regular announcements or register for our campaign school. It's your very own online personal trainer for winning campaigns. www.electionu.com. Click, learn, win.